Hi, everyone. Welcome to Haskell Exchange. We're very excited to have you here. We've got a great program for you. My name is Richard Eisenberg. I'm a member of the program committee that helped put together this program, and looking forward to 2 great days of talks and a fun evening tonight of after-talk activity. We have a fun social event planned for that. But after this introduction, I'm going to pass it off to Maya, who will tell us about sort of housekeeping details, and then we're all excited for Simon's big announcement about Haskell Foundation in just a few minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever in the world you are, Skills Matter welcomes you to Haskell Exchange 2020. I'm Maya Hart from Skills Matter, and we're delighted to present 2 days of insightful presentations that represent the best practices and future direction of functional programming with Haskell. We are so happy that you're able to be here with us. None of us could have predicted exactly how 2020 would play out and the level of challenge that the global pandemic would present. We've had to completely reimagine Haskell Exchange for the current world. Someday, when it's practical and safe, we'll be back together again, physically, in the same room, like we were in 2019. In the meantime, we believed it was critical to carry on our tradition of supporting the Haskell community, a community that is very important to us. We are committed to advancing the adoption and success of Haskell. We are here to help present new ideas and offer the community's experts a means of amplifying their voices. Haskell Exchange 2020 will be filled with insight and instruction. We want you to learn from the success and failure that your peers have experienced with Haskell. And while it's different than being together in person, we hope you'll reach out to your fellow attendees as well as to the speakers. We want you to make new professional connections that will last for years to come and enhance everyone's experience. Over the next 2 days, you'll be hearing from more than 15 speakers representing disparate geographies, different levels of experience, a variety of domains, and a wide range of approaches. Selecting this content was a challenge, and none of it would have been possible without the hard work and dedication of our programming committee. On behalf of Skills Matter and Haskell Exchange, we'd like to thank our programming committee members: Emmanuel Deloy Ito, David Eichmann, Richard Eisenberg, Michael Kowalec, Emily Pillmore, and Alejandro Serrano. They worked really hard in selecting this program. Let's please offer them a virtual round of applause and our heartfelt gratitude. We'd like to offer special thanks to our event sponsors. Our gold sponsors are CTO Craft, JustPay, and Twig.io. CTO Craft is the UK's first learning and coaching network built for engineering managers, CTOs, and tech leads. They work with CTOs, engineering managers, teams, and entire businesses to build professional and leadership skills through coaching, mentoring, workshops, and training. JustPay is the leading mobile payments platform in India. With their experience in scaling functional programming to a 250-member team, they are investing in new learning methods for India's young and vibrant talent to create a new generation of Haskellers in India. Founded in 2013, Twig.io has become an established research and development lab at the heart of Europe, with a single mission in mind: to build fast, correct, and maintainable software solutions with its clients. Our silver sponsor is 47 Degrees. 47 Degrees is a global consulting and training firm who fundamentally believes that all enterprises can deliver landmark performance and innovate on new business models with data and software. We encourage you to stop by each of our sponsors' booths and engage with them to learn more about their services. Skills Matter and Haskell Exchange are proud to foster an inclusive and welcoming community. To that end, we do have a code of conduct in place. We've added this link to the event's chat feature, and we ask that you please read the code and adhere to it in all of your interactions today. Thank you in advance for helping improve everyone's experience. On the reception page where you entered the Hop-in event platform, you will find a schedule for today's proceedings. If you have any questions about the conference, the platform, or the event, you can place them in the chat feature under Events, or visit the Skills Matter virtual booth to chat with a Skills Matter representative. If you have specific questions for our speaker sessions, please place them in the chat feature of the stage. We kindly ask that you only place speaker questions into the stage chat so that we can expedite these answers for our attendees. And again, all other inquiries should be placed into the event chat or into the Skills Matter booth. I'd also like to mention that we will end today's proceedings with the first annual Haskell Exchange Dumb Haskell Games Trivia Contest, hosted by Scott Conley, CTO of Skills Matter. It's a chance to match wits and have some good fun learning even more about Haskell. So now, without further ado, let's move on to today's keynote address. Peyton Jones is here with a very special announcement about the formation of the Haskell Foundation, an independent non-profit organisation dedicated to broadening the adoption of Haskell by supporting its ecosystem of tools, libraries, education and research. After the announcement, there will be an extended Q&A session. Please place your questions into the stage chat feature, and those of you joining us on YouTube can place your questions into that platform's chat feature. And now, please welcome Peyton Jones.
Well, good morning. The Haskell Exchange is one of my favourite events of the whole year, when I get to see Haskell in action, making the world a better place. I was a bit worried last year that the Haskell Exchange had hit the buffers, but I'm absolutely delighted that after a difficult period, Skills Matter has been reborn. Thank you, Frank Rodrigo, Scott Connolly and friends for making that happen. It's a big thing. Moreover, it's been reborn with the same community-focused open source values and ethos that it always had. And I'd like us all to take a moment to salute Wendy DeVolder, whose skill and vision created Skills Matter and its community with exactly those values. Thank you so much, Wendy. You are a star. Now, usually I give a technical talk at the Haskell Exchange, but today I'm not. I'm going to announce the launch of the Haskell Foundation. You'll see that even the font is different. No Comic Sans today. So I'm going to speak for about 10 or 15 minutes, and during the Q&A question and answer session afterwards, I'll be joined by Ben Gamari, Emily Palimore, and Jasper van der Jucht. And you can type questions in a text mode, as Maya just taught you. So, what is the Haskell Foundation? It's a new, independent, non-profit organization dedicated to broadening the adoption of Haskell by supporting its ecosystem of tools, libraries, education, and research. Well, you may say, that all sounds very nice and well-meaning, but do we really need another organization in the Haskell ecosystem? So I love the Haskell community. You're like a kind of extended family to me, really. And back in the day, I knew every member of that family personally. But we have had so much fun together over the years that the Haskell ecosystem is a lot bigger these days. Haskell's steady espousal of purely functional programming has not only, I think, been influential, it's made Haskell an increasingly widely used and successful language in production. So now the whole company's using Haskell in a mission-critical way that I don't even know about. That's pretty exciting for an academic like me. But this very success brings its own challenges. So here are 4 things that I think have scaled a bit less than perfectly as our community has grown. I'll call them underserved needs. So here they are, the full user experience, technical infrastructure and glue, community connective tissue, and resources and funding. I want to say a little bit about each of these in turn. So let's start with the user experience. So the Haskell community is full of passionate individuals and teams, all beavering away, but none of us is focused on the whole user experience of installing Haskell, learning how to use it, documentation, error messages, libraries, upgrades, and all of that kind of thing. Instead, our community, our ecosystem looks a bit like this. We have lots of very effective and effectively run groups. Here are some of them. I'm sure there are lots that I haven't mentioned here. But speaking from the one that I'm most involved with, let's say the GHC Steering Committee, I feel as if I'm deeply committed to making GHC into a good tool and to making its own messages better, but I don't pay very much attention to the whole user journey of which GHC is just a part. I think that's a bit true of these other teams. In effect, we're a bunch of suppliers and we don't really have anybody speaking for our customers, as it were. So part of the thing that I think the Haskell Foundation may help with is act as a voice for the users of Haskell and speak for their complete journey through it. So part of that journey is that there's lots of little bits and pieces that have to work well if you're going to use Haskell in a mission critical way. You need easy on-ramp, you need pain-free installers, you need upgrades to work well, you need profiling to work well, you need it to work on all sorts of different platforms, you want good documentation. And these are only little examples. And each of these things do have people that pay a lot of attention to them, but somehow there are bits that we go back to this picture, there are bits that kind of fall in the cracks between our various little silos and that are perhaps not as well served. And it's also partly because they're sort of boring but useful, right? They're really important to get right, but it's really hard to get all of it right. And it takes a lot of hours. And a lot of our volunteers do work a lot of hours, but it's hard to sustain across the whole piece. So that's technical infrastructure. Then there's kind of community glue as well. So because we have all these different groups, it's quite easy for things to fall between the cracks, technical issues somehow. It's quite easy for one group to accidentally, quite inadvertently, do something that perhaps messes up another group. And that's a shame if that happens. So I feel as if we are weak on the connective tissue that might connect up our different groups so that we can work more productively together. And that's a hard thing, right? We're a big, geographically distributed, numerous group of people. So, and making a big geographically distributed, numerous group of people work together really well is hard. So the Haskell Foundation is going to fix that, but I hope that it will provide a mechanism that can help with better communication across the piece. So that was, is another way then to regard the picture as a sort of, think about this as the Haskell Foundation. I hope that it will have, as it were, arms around these groups. Think of it as supporting, if you like, or if you like an umbrella, sheltering, but not controlling, right? This is about, I think that probably the underneath supporting metaphor is perhaps the best one. The last of these unmet needs that I wanted to raise is funding. So it's really hard for volunteers, no matter how well motivated they are, who have other day jobs, to reliably sustain mission critical infrastructure. It really is. So I think we're getting to the scale where we really need people whose day job is to do that kind of work. And we already have some of those thanks to generous funding from particular individuals and firms. But it does mean that we need money. And up to now, so we've been in the position of having individual groups seeking money. So as the GHC, from the GHC point of view, I have explicitly sought funding to support GHC's frontline maintenance. We've been supported very generously by Microsoft and now GitHub over the years, but it's not very effective doing this one group at a time thing. I think our hope is that the foundation can serve as a more credible donation target, if you like, to companies that feel good about Haskell, maybe are using Haskell and would like to have an organization to give to that they can be confident will spend that money well. That I think is one of our hopes for the foundation, that it may serve as a credible donation target as a formally constituted non-profit organization with a big sort of umbrella-ish or supportive role. So those are the things on the funding front. This is something that distinguishes the foundation from things that have gone before. We need, I think, to go beyond being well-meaning to actually having the oomph to do something. And we've already been quite successful thanks to the generosity of these companies already. We've raised over $200,000 for year one. That's enough to employ an executive director, for example. So that starts to make a real difference. that starts to make a real difference. So thank you, GitHub, IOHK, Obsidian, Skills Matter, Twig, and WellTyped. We are so grateful to you, and I hope that other people in other companies who are listening to this may feel motivated after this conversation to go to their companies and think, could we contribute, perhaps, even in a small way. Now, how is the Haskell Foundation going to work? I think it will only work well if it is adheres to the principles and ethos that characterize, in my view, the Haskell community. So here are some of them set out. I think it's really important that the Haskell Foundation is seeking to empower the community. That is, make us all more effective in what we are already doing. It is not going to take over and still less replace any of these existing groups. I think its role rather is to support them so that they can do what they do more effectively and with fewer distractions. I want our community to be open, friendly, and diverse, and welcoming and inclusive. And those are values that I hope will be promoted by the foundation. I want the foundation to be transparent so that people know how decisions are taken and feel that they have a way in which they can influence those decisions, and they know where money comes from and what it's being spent on, all of that kind of thing. We'd like to do our business in public, as it were. Of course, like what many of us do, I think any software that the foundation writes will be open source. And just at the bottom here, this is important to me, right? That we are focusing here on broadening adoption and prioritizing the user journey, right? But we want to stay true to Haskell's principles, right? Haskell as a programming language has a distinctive take on really taking purely functional programming seriously, and I think we want to continue to do that. Okay, so how's the foundation going to be organized then? So there'll be a board. Right, I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. I think we will want to have at least one full-time person. I hope that we'll raise enough money to have more than one in due course, but we'll have at least one full-time executive director. It'll be the sort of arms and legs of the organization, so it isn't just a bunch of volunteers who talk about the foundation in a tiny slice of their time. But most of the work will almost certainly get done by volunteer-led working groups or teams. Or actually simply by the existing groups that we have, and the foundation can serve perfectly well as a support to those existing projects. I think we're quite keen, going back to transparency, that all the discussion and decisions will take place on publicly visible media, so people can see what discussions are taking place and have a chance to influence them. The only exceptions to that are the obvious things like ad hominem discussions, which would be inappropriate to put on public media. Now, going back to the board then, in the end, a non-profit organization needs to have its decisions taken by someone, and everybody should know who they are. So that's going to be the board, and they're responsible for, essentially everything about the foundation: its goals, its directions, its staff, its finance, and its long-term success. And the membership of the board should somehow reflect the community and its diversity and its stakeholders. We're thinking of a board as, around about a dozen people, small enough to be effective, but big enough to have some hope of representation. And I'm going to talk in a second about how we might find members of the board. But before I do, I really want to stress that this is, if you like, the high order bit of this conversation, that I really like all of you to think of this new entity, this new foundation, as our thing, not their thing. This is not something that somebody else is doing to us. I would like you to think of it as something that we are doing, together to ourselves, right? It's a way we're trying to help to organize ourselves better. And I think, and this invitation to contribute to shape and be part of the foundation is a genuine one. This is a community endeavor. It's been gestated over the last, I guess, 3 months or so, 3 months plus a bit. We have made efforts to reach out individually to lots of individual stakeholders. But this is the moment at which we're opening up the conversation to everybody and inviting you to participate. So how can you participate? Well, here we go. I want to suggest 3 things. Firstly, here's the website, which should be live now or very, very shortly. So first, you can just stay informed. So if you subscribe to this HF Announce mailing list, we'll just keep you posted, not spam you with tons of stuff, but it just means that as developments happen, you'll hear about them. So I think almost everybody, you should just subscribe to this so you hear about what's going on. Then this sort of discussion mailing list is one in which you can, the first one is essentially a read-only thing, like Foundation will send stuff to you to keep you informed. The second one is a read-write thing. It's the place where we can talk about what Foundation is, ask questions about it, make suggestions, and just generally discuss, shape, and improve it. And the third thing you can do, and this is a sort of immediate and concrete thing, is to nominate members for the Foundation board. So how to do that? So we had to think a bit about how are we going to bootstrap the board, right? It's all very well saying we're going to have a Foundation board, but where are its members going to come from? We can't just appoint them out of thin air because that wouldn't have very much legitimacy. We don't really want a national election like is happening right at this very moment in a large country across the water. So this, what we decided to do was to appoint an interim board, whose members I will show you shortly, have a call for nominations for all of the positions on the Foundation board, the permanent Foundation board, and get the interim board to review those nominations against written criteria, and essentially appoint the Foundation board, and then the interim board simply dissolves. So the call for nominations is open. You should find it on the Foundation's website. Let me show you who the interim board members are. So here they are: Leonard Augustin, Chris Dornan, Jasper van der Jucht, Gabrielle Keller, Ed Kmet, Simon Marlowe, myself, and Stephanie Wyrick. And my earnest hope and belief is that you regard this group of people as a somewhat independent and trustworthy group of people who you can say, I'd be happy to have them appoint the Foundation board. So that's the interim board. We're calling for nominations. The deadline for nominations is fairly far off, January. I think January the 11th is on. You'll find it on the website. Because we wanted to give plenty of time for people to ask questions, get their act in order, and think who to nominate or to whether to you want to nominate yourself. So going back here, here's the list of things you might do by way of engagement, and we'll start in a second with questions and answers from the chat and YouTube. But I do want to stress very much this point I was making here. This is our thing. Please regard all this positively. Try to shape it to be something that you would be proud of, that you would be excited to participate in. I really think it does. It does serve a need. I think it could, it could fail, but I think it's much more likely to succeed if we all, pull together and as it were, treat it as something that we would like to see succeed, and we'll try to help it do so. So thank you very much. I'm now, I think I'm now joined by Emily Billimore, Ben Gamari, and Jasper van der Jucht. I think maybe I better stop sharing my screen. And so you should be seeing them. And I think the idea is that I'm going to act as sort of question compere, and they're mainly going to do the answering. So this is you get to hear other voices than just mine. Good. And just by way of framing time-wise, we have at most half an hour for this. If you don't have enough questions, we'll stop early. But here we go. So here's a question from Craig Cowan. Oh no, in fact, sorry, it's from Konstantin Rydnikov. Please forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Who asks, Rust seems like a perfect complementary language to Haskell, which did well so many things mentioned today. Do you think it makes sense working towards unifying experience with their community? Would any of you like to respond to that?
I'd be happy to. Yeah, can I? Am I heard? By the way,
I can hear you.
Good. Yeah, so I think this is actually something that we've been, I think, as a community, gradually working towards in some ways. I know when we were setting up the GHC steering committee and the associated proposals process, we took a great deal of inspiration from the Rust process, their RFC process. There's further things that I think could be taken there, their approach to sort of community source documentation and their ability to sort of mobilize, groups of people in a single sort of thematic direction, I think is something that this notion of a working group is something that indeed is potentially applicable in our case. And I think, this is something that having a group of people in the form of the Haskell Foundation with resources to put towards projects that sort of are in the general community need is something that the foundation could facilitate. I think that, so the answer is yes, I think, broadly.
I'm going to move on to a sort of new question after sort of one response, unless anybody really wants to jump in, so that because otherwise panel Q&As can be very slow moving if every panelist answers every question. So, but Emily and Jasper, if you want to jump in response to that, feel free. Otherwise, let me ask. Joachim asks another general question of a similar kind. Are there any existing foundations in other communities out there that inspired the Haskell Foundation? Foundations that managed to achieve these goals effectively and efficiently?
Jasper, you want to take that one? Or?
Yeah, sure. So there are a number of existing foundations that we took inspiration from. For example, the FreeBSD Foundation, the Apache Foundation, and also, as was said before, the Rust community. So we try to take the best parts out of all of these things and sort of try to apply them in a way that would work for a community that has already existed for a long time.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, and maybe also to harken back to the previous question, I think one of the things that I think we should also keep in mind is that a lot of these communities are also still learning in this regard. In the case of the Haskell Foundation, the Rust community, for instance, has also been recently, with the recent changes within Mozilla, trying to work out how they're going to fund their community. And I think there are a lot of open questions that still remain there. They're working towards a similar sort of model as I think what the Haskell community has ended up with, or with the Haskell Foundation. But ultimately, we're all different in some ways. Rust is sort of a relatively new language with a certain group of users. We have a much different group of users, and the sort of types of companies that use our language and that are willing to resource it are sort of different from those that are willing to support Rust, and so that may be also another consideration there that with respect to the funding in particular and how we structure the foundation, there may be differences to what other groups have done.
Luigi also mentions, what can we, as he puts it, steal with pride from the F# Foundation. So I think again, probably similar remarks apply. I like the term "steal with pride." We should imitate the best of what everyone else has done, and we have done some work at looking at what other people have done. Let's just switch topics a little bit, though. Travis asked, are there any plans on taking individual contributions in addition to corporate level sponsorship? Emily, do you want to respond to that?
Hey everyone. We do plan on taking individual sponsors. Unfortunately, it's not something that we finished in time for the talk. So the long short of it is yes. One of the models for funding was something that we drew from the Erlang Foundation, actually, in terms of having two separate tracks one for corporate funding, right, which is sort of the higher tiers, slightly more corporate-y type branding stuff. And another was the individual track, where sort of maybe small individual contributions from individuals who wanted maybe like a shout out on social media, or just I guess just smaller sorts of sponsorship sort of benefits, kind of like maybe just get a shout out, maybe get your name on the a list of projects or something. Yes, the long and short of it is yes. We do want this in the future. We want to make sure that everyone is involved with the Haskell Foundation. And it's not just a case of, a few of us working behind the scenes, but it's actually more involved in the sense that anyone can join. Anyone is free to volunteer. Anyone is also free to donate. and provide their own, sort of personal, generous contributions. And we'll have that up sometime in the next few weeks to a month.
Great, thanks. But I really like the tone of your question, Travis, that individuals, it would be good for us to make sure that individuals do have a way to contribute directly, because we all, as it were, express our love of Haskell. That's why
to add to that as well, I mean, there are, to sort of piggyback on the previous question, there are organizations, the Blender Foundation comes to mind, which have shown that you really can actually make a real serious dent in the funding of a community via individual contributions. So, I think this is definitely one of the, and indeed in the Haskell community, I've been asked many, many times whether we can accept individual contributions, and just sadly, thus far, we have not really had the facilities to do that, but hopefully the Haskell Foundation will be able to open that door.
Right, great. Let's another question about Alp asks, you mentioned funding for year one. Have there been discussions about the first few concrete things to tackle with that funding?
I guess I can take that. Yes. So indeed, there has been, we've actually discussed this at great length. So there's a sort of preliminary technical agenda that we set out to write. And there's a document that sort of describes culminated in a bit of a write-up that we believe, sort of identifies a few major themes that we might want to consider. And ultimately what it's going to come down to is, when we have a final board and a sort of decision-making process for that board and priorities, they'll have to, sort of finalize on a set of concrete projects. But in broad strokes, we sort of decided, saw that there's a few sort of major themes, some of which Simon pointed out. So for one, sort of the ability to actually get working in Haskell, to bring up an environment and to actually be able to go from nothing to hello world. That's something that we do have some great tools in the community for, Stack and GHC up, and there's a lot of sort of fragmented efforts. But ultimately what we need to do, and what we've lacked in the past, is to actually have the ability to really write down a set of concrete steps for how users can get going on like the Haskell web, Haskell.org. Moreover, we also tools for understanding performance, both runtime and otherwise, so profiling tools, monitoring tools, integration with, which are very much necessary in commercial deployments, especially. This is sort of an area where we're somewhat lacking. And then finally, just being able to move the language forward without causing undue pain to users. So ultimately, GHC is being released now, roughly once every 6 months, and that some users have said that they're starting to feel a bit overwhelmed by that, especially in the core libraries, ensuring that on day one of a GHC release that you can actually build a project that involves a meaningful number of dependencies is something that we've struggled with, just because you have to percolate those the necessary changes on every 6 months down through a rather deep set of deep tree of dependencies, and that's something that just takes time. So we think that by sort of allowing the organization, having the foundation, somebody in charge to actually have the ability to and be paid, hopefully, to look at the set of widely used libraries and actively work to ensure that they remain compatible with recent GHC releases and in a timely manner.
That will be the overall sort of ethos of this is trying to fill in gaps that are underserved. Something like an obvious need is something like a Haskell IDE, right? But there's already a group that's working really hard on that, so the foundation is going to interfere with that. So it's trying to fill things that are not done. And as you mentioned, Ben, all of this is, once we got a board, then the board will decide about things like this. So everything is, well, we should say everything is provisional. Nothing is cast in stone, right?
Yes.
Once we've got a board, they can change it. But on this question about what might we do and when, you talked about technical things, Ben, just now. But Veronica says, what plans do you already have for education and training or mentorship, if there are any? Is that Jasper or Emily? Do you want to respond to that?
Oh, or Emily, perhaps.
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been focusing on for the technical agenda, well, the technical agenda is actually focused on tech for the most part, but the educational track has been focused less at startup. But we do have plans to eventually, with sort of generous contributions from Well-Typed and IOHK and a few other folks in the industry like SimSpace, actually put together a kind of Coursera-style onboarding course, similar to something like Rust or Scala, and provide a sort of unified foundation for all the basic things that you would need to learn to get started in Haskell. And so the short answer is yes. Yes, we do want to focus eventually on building out these educational tracks and have people involved in contributing to those tracks and offer this as perhaps a sort of free onboarding for the language. Yeah, we haven't focused too much on this, but yes, the answer is yes.
And I think I'd add to that one of, as Simon said, the sort of goal here is to fill in the gaps, right? So right now there are companies that you can pay, Well-Typed being one of them, and that will give you a training for sort of more advanced topics within Haskell. The gap that the foundation in particular would be filling is more of a maybe documentation or as Emily said, onboarding, being able to have a unified roadmap from for a new user to go from knowing nothing about Haskell to being able to be somewhat proficient and be able to write a program, because that really, from our discussions with various users of the language in a commercial setting, one of the major concerns that some people have expressed is the ability to actually get and to hire people, and that is something that making the onboarding experience as easy as possible is certainly going to help. And right now we have a lot of documentation, but it's quite scattered, and so the consolidation of that and sort of ensuring that there is a clear trajectory into the language is really the goal here, I think.
Yeah.
Great. Graham Hutton asks a sort of constitutional question. He says, there's a couple of sort of constitutional questions here in the chat. One is, Graham says, has an executive director already been appointed? So I can take the answer to that is no. But then he says, if not, what's the process for this, as it be a vital role for the foundation? Jasper, do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, so the goal of the interim board, well, one of their goals is to appoint this executive director, and we've written a job description to sort of describe the person we're looking for. But yeah, like as Simon said, all of this is still up in the air. We're still looking for the final board. We're still looking for the director. And we hope with by doing that we sort of get the voice of the community. But
crucially, there'll be an open process, right? So there'll be a positive advertisement, there'll be a job specification, and a person specification, and depending on the timescale, if the foundation board is in place, then the foundation board will appoint, and if we get there more quickly, then the interim board will. But it's not sort of just being done behind the scenes, if you see what I mean.
It's worth noting that the interim board is charged with hiring the next board, and that board is charged with hiring an executive director as part of their charter. And they will be the ones to set the dates and the job description is going to be amended by them. So once we select a board, the board will select and ratify a technical agenda as well as the executive director. And this will be over the next few months. The exact process is going to be that of almost the same nomination process as a board of directors. You submit a nominee to the board. They will consider it in light of the job description, and they will come to their choice in a meaningful time frame.
But it's likely to be a sort of normal job search process. Likely there to be interviews as well.
Right. Exactly.
So
we have this on the site, by the way. We have the call for nominations on the site, so you can view that and use that as a proxy for an actual sort of job application.
And speaking about nominations, the eminent CMDV asks, with it being nominations, does it risk, do we risk having a foundation board that's selected based on popularity, missing out on people who'd be really good but not known?
Well, that's a problem in any application process. How do you know your unknowns, basically? In some sense, every job application is a popularity contest. You have to submit yourself in order to be considered for candidacy. We can only do so much. We will attempt to do our best over the next few weeks to reach out to people and see if we can uncover any people and get them to nominate themselves. You can nominate yourself. You can nominate a friend. It's bad practice, so you should ask them and get their consent before actually, submitting their name in. But I mean, technically, you don't have to if you have their resume and maybe you want to just send it in. But it is a problem. Like, yes, what if there is a perfect candidate sitting out there somewhere in the middle of Wyoming and they just haven't contacted anyone in, the past 10 years? Well, they might be, but if we can't discover them, if you can't discover them, then unfortunately we just can't do anything about it.
But you've got nominations. Go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just going to say, and maybe this is something that we should actually talk a bit more about, is what, if somebody is thinking about nominating themselves or they think they have somebody in mind, what are the sort of requirements? What does the role entail, and what sort of obligations do you have as a board member? Emily, I'm not sure whether you want to talk about that or.
So here's the point about the board. The board is actually going to be doing work. So this is a bit of a strange board, right? So normally they're sort of appointed processes, and people end up just kind of sitting on them and then, spinning their wheels, and then things don't actually get done. So I think this might be a deterrent for most of the people who might want to get involved and then maybe don't know what to do, right? So the board, if you are on the board, you will be meeting consistently with an executive director. It is your express position to be working with an executive director to accomplish a technical agenda, to answer to investors and sort of technical advisors, and continually reassess what our technical agenda should be, making sure that we meet our goals in a meaningful time frame along with the executive director. The executive director is going to be the one who's sort of like the legs of the board, the arms of the board, who actually takes these projects and forces them to completion via project management and organization. But the board is the one who has to keep them honest, right? So it will be a job. It will be, 10 hours out of your week, maybe. And that's mainly the charter of the board. The executive director is going to be the one who's actually sort of like employed full-time to execute things as kind of a pseudo project manager, team lead, developer, all these things rolled into one.
As you'll see on the, if you look at the call for nominations, which I hope that many of you will do after this session, you'll see that it does articulate the role of the board and what it means to be a member in not in gory detail, but in quite a bit more detail, to articulate some of the things that Emily's describing. I hope that 10 hours a week is an overestimate. I think that might be.
Yeah.
Of course. So but Emily's point is, it's a serious commitment, not just an honorary appointment that you can put on your CV. So I was on the Haskell Foundation board. That is important. Yeah.
It's also important to note that, one of the reasons we take investors is to hold ourselves accountable, because one of the things that has happened over the years in Haskell's processes is that you have something like maybe I'm just going to put Haskell.org in the hot seat. Haskell.org is not beholden to anyone in particular, and it hasn't been extremely productive for that reason. And in our case, our incentives, I believe, are aligned in the sense that an executive director answers to a board. The board answers to its investors. Investors and the community and the board set the technical agenda. So there's so much investment in things getting done that the board can, place some pressure on the ED to get things done. The ED can, sort of suffer under those pressures. I think with the way we've constructed everything, incentives are there to actually do things and to get things done. So this is a good opportunity for anyone that's keen on, really putting their feet to the pavement and running with this thing. You should apply. If you're really interested in project management and getting these things done, you should definitely apply. And even if not, you might have the correct qualifications. As a board member, you don't really need to be that, you're not going to be committed to this as full-time, but you still have the same obligations.
Speaking about aligning incentives, Joachim Beitner asks, can funding partners or sponsoring partners expect to have a say in the goals, priorities, and technical directions of the foundation? Or is the expectation that the Haskell Foundation is reasonably independent in that way?
Jasper, do you want to handle that one?
I think that will actually depend on the final board. I mean, obviously, if we get sponsoring from companies, you want to take their view into perspective. But as Simon said earlier in the talk, we don't want to be successful at all costs, right? If a company asks us to make variables in Haskell mutable by default, that would betray our principles. And so I think there will be. I mean, the board will have the final say, but I expect there will be some discussion.
Sorry. And I think it's also worth saying that the Haskell Foundation is an organization, and we hope that it will have some amount of authority, speaks with some authority in the community. But ultimately, we cannot. There are existing structures, and the Haskell Foundation is not meant to supplant those structures, right? So for instance, the Hackage trustees will still be an independent group. The GHC steering committee will remain an independent group with independent decision-making authority. And what we've done in the sort of preparatory stage and in trying to bring people around this idea of the foundation is we've tried to ask each of the major projects within the community that we think would be sort of within the scope of work that might be done by or on behalf of the Haskell Foundation. We've tried to talk to these people, maintainers and the chairs of the various committees within the community, and make sure that they're sort of willing to affiliate with the Haskell Foundation.
Right. So
yeah,
we've talked to like as Ben said, I've talked to a number of projects and committees and groups in the Haskell community. And the idea that we envision is that these existing groups and projects who've done a lot of great work, we obviously can't ignore them, and we would like for them to align themselves with the Haskell Foundation. What that means is obviously not that the Haskell Foundation takes control over these groups or anything. They will still be self-governed. But there is some sort of endorsement going on. So the Haskell Foundation endorses these groups, and this group endorses the Haskell Foundation. And what we ask from what the Haskell Foundation will ask from these groups is a sort of commitment to some guidelines around transparency, around membership and around behavior. So, for example, we would like to have good clarity of all the decisions that the group has taken. We would ask that discussions happen on like an open forum. If there's some sort of membership involved, like with the Haskell Odor Committee, we ask that there's like an election process. We ask that people can easily see who is in these committees. And maybe most importantly, we ask that there's a good way for new people to join, because that's maybe been a problem with some of these committees. So these committees should really lay out a way for new members who are interested to join them. And then we also ask all these groups and projects to adopt the guidelines for respectful communication as well. And hopefully that way we can build a strong set of affiliated projects and groups and push the Haskell Foundation forward that way.
Great, thank you. So we've got sort of 4 minutes to go. Just on that last thing, to return to Joachim's question, which was about the influence of funding or sponsoring partners. I think this is kind of important, and it's a relationship that's going to evolve. We have to, it's very generous of anybody to fund the foundation, right? We have to, and the board will need to think about how to, if the board just goes off and does things that those organizations don't care about, they'll stop funding it, right? So, and I have to take judgments about those things. So all I can say is that at the moment, we haven't put in any institutional mechanisms for funding partners to have a direct influence. But the board will need to think about how to give them an appropriate voice, shall I say, one that reflects the fact that they are contributing in a material way. But I don't think any of them are seeking to. This is not a takeover of the Haskell community by, as it were, Big Haskell. Our sponsors genuinely want the Haskell Foundation to succeed in this independent way that we've all been describing. So, lastly, just before we finish, there was one. Yes, Tobias says, is the foundation going to support or facilitate some kind of mediation in case of community conflicts, or provide other means to avoid such conflicts in the first place? And I think this is, maybe I can respond to this. This is what I meant by community, well, one of the things I meant by community glue. I think it will be, you can't act as a mediator unless people trust you, right? So I think the foundation is going to need to build up trust with all the little subgroups and individuals involved, so that they then take it seriously. Because it's different to starting an organization from scratch. Say, Swift, for example, just started in one place, everything grew from the one seed. Here we have an existing ecosystem of well-led groups, and we can't just muscle in on them. So we're going to build up trust. But my personal ambition is, I think the ambition of the foundation is to be effective in some kind of mediating role in the hopefully increasingly rare cases when that is needed. And I think it would be helpful to have a forum in which those conversations can take place, which we've somewhat lacked up to now. Let me ask one more thing in the last 2 minutes, because Matthias has asked this a couple of times. Will groups under the umbrella receive any direct funding from the foundation?
Emily, you want to take that? Or?
Yeah, so we haven't discussed that. I don't believe we ever really discussed direct funding. We did discuss direct resourcing. So a slight shift in perspective there. Money will not be funneled to any individual org, I don't think. At least we haven't decided on this yet. But we do plan on dedicating individuals to helping out with the maintenance burden and the sort of general burden of maintaining these organizations. And this is kind of a key point, and I'll see if I can cram this into 3 minutes. But the main problem with all of these things is, if you see an org suffering a bit, or maybe like a particular maintainer or a particular project are falling behind in terms of standards, the answer is not to get angry at them or throw money at them. It's to throw people at them and help people sort of get back on their feet and maintain these projects properly. And then ask, once they're back on their feet, okay, how can we prevent this in the future? Money only does so much, right? Money is not as good as a second person, though. So what we are hoping to do is eventually hire people full-time to actually work on Haskell Foundation projects to take individual maybe maintainers or projects or topics and dedicate a person to help them if there is a need there. So if you could imagine kind of what happened on Vector this year, where a particular maintainer was the only one on that project, and it's a massive project in the ecosystem, and they were not releasing on a particularly frequent schedule because they were backlogged so hard. There was a lot of outcry, but the answer that got it back on track was people volunteering their time and committing themselves as maintainers to the project to help that one maintainer release on a timely schedule. And now we have a 6-month release schedule for one of the most used libraries in Haskell, and everything is sort of, nice now on the project. The same principle, I think, can be applied to basically any of our organizations. If you need help, just ask. We will help provide it, and we will put funding towards providing it for you.
Okay, thanks, Emily. I'm conscious that it's 12:56, so we should be wrapping up. So I'd like to say a big thank you to Emily, Ben, and Jasper. I'm conscious that we have not answered all the questions that you put into the live chat, but we have collected them all. And we'll sort of post answers on the Haskell, the HF Announce mailing list. So the thing to do is to go to the Haskell.Foundation website and subscribe to the mailing list, and then you'll get there. So many apologies to the people whose questions we didn't address directly. Let's finish by just remembering that this is our thing. Please join in. Please realize that everything at the moment is still on volunteer-only effort. So when Emily says we, you're talking about a bunch of busy people who have other day jobs. There's a sort of capacity issue. The Haskell Foundation, even when it's up and running, will not be able to answer all of our prayers. Right? It will be something that we will need to contribute, something that we do together. So with that, as a collective thing that we're doing together, we can wrap up. Please do engage with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you, Simon, and panelists Ben, Emily, and Jasper for that exciting update from the Haskell Foundation. And thanks to all contributors for an enthusiastic Q&A session. For those of you joining us via YouTube today, this is the end of our live stream. If you've enjoyed what you've seen so far at the Haskell Exchange, we would love to welcome you to the rest of our conference.